You're listening to the B&H Photography Podcast. For over 40 years, B&H has been the professional source for photography, video, audio, and more. For your favorite gear, news, and reviews, visit us at bnh.com or download the B&H app to your iPhone or Android device. Now here's your host, Alan Weitz.
Greetings and welcome to the B&H Photography Podcast. Before we put the car in drive, a reminder to rate us and leave a review on iTunes. Your thoughts and comments help us make this show that much better. Thursday, August 25th, 2016 will mark the 100th anniversary of the National Park Service. Since its founding, the 59 parks included under the umbrella of the National Park Service have been photographed by just about every celebrated landscape photographer, not to mention an untold number of common folks like you and I. The National Park Service historic photographic collection contains over 2 million images of landscapes, architecture, Native American heritage, the Civilian Conservation Corps, NPS personnel, roads, and much more. About 2,000 of these images are already viewable online and more on the way. Today, John Harris and I will be discussing the relationship of photography and the Park Service and how photography has been and continues to be a promotional vehicle for the parks going back to the earliest days. Joining us is Chris Nicholson, photographer, educator with National Parks at Night and author of Photographing National Parks. Also joining us is Kerry Gallivan, CEO and co-founder of Chimani, a free app for exploring and touring the national parks. Let's start by talking about the photography aspect of the 100th anniversary of the Park Service. Over the past century, just about every well-known landscape photographer like Ansel Adams, Carlton, Watkins, and a whole bunch of names we've been throwing around here, some of which we've known and some we don't, they've all photographed the parks, and some of these people have photographed the same locations at different times. It seems that the national parks and photography have been together from day one. Photography became sort of reachable to the general public about 100 years ago and became part of the mainstream. Same time the parks started going. Want to talk a little bit about the relationship between the two? Photography was definitely used to sell the concept to government agencies as well as the public and get a little more interest out there. Any thoughts about that as far as how photography and the parks have been entwined?
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. It does go back to day one. Yellowstone was the first national park. And remember, this is the late 1800s. People weren't traveling cross-country. So these stories were coming back of this place where water was shooting out of the ground and, there were pools of boiling water and all. People just didn't believe it. They thought that these stories were fake. So when Congress was asked to preserve this land, they actually sent an expedition out to check it out. See, is this place real? Is it worth us doing something about? And there was a painter and a photographer, Thomas Moran and William Henry Jackson, who documented this. I mean, Moran did these beautiful paintings of Yellowstone. He's got great paintings of Yosemite as well. And they brought the artwork back so that people could see this was real and how amazing it was. And it was huge. It was very key to starting the national park movement, which has grown so much, over the last 100+ years, and is now a worldwide phenomenon that the U.S. is credited with. And art and photography were huge in that.
Chris, tell us about your work, and if you can give us an idea afterwards of when you're going out to photograph a park, what's your plan of action? What's your thought process?
Okay. Well, the first time I ever visited a national park was when I was 1, so I don't have a lot of memories of it. But the point is, it's something I've been doing my whole life. My parents used to bring us camping often into the national parks. And then eventually I got into photography around college, and the two just kind of went together. So when I traveled, I'd try to stop at national parks, and working as a photographer, I worked in magazines for 10 years. And
where did you grow up? Where?
I grew up in Connecticut.
Oh, okay. All right.
But I would try to even sneak national park work into assignments. So I worked for Tennis Magazine, and they sent me to Marco Island to cover an event. And, it was sort of a travel story. And I told the art director, I said, well, Everglades is right next to Marco Island. We should probably include that. I was, that's a good idea, Chris. Go spend a couple of days in the park. But honestly, I mean, I've pursued it as a passion. I'll go shoot the parks whether I'm getting paid or not. I'm always trying to work a project around it. Lately, it seems I'm working on 2-3 projects at a time in a park, which is great. I just love being able to incorporate that into my career. And then the book too was.
How'd that come about?
That was it was very serendipitous. I was doing a presentation at the B&H event space about photographing the parks. This was in 2012 or 13. And I was being introduced, and they said, Chris is working on a book on photographing the parks. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I didn't say anything. But a couple of days later, I was meeting with the president of a book publisher I've worked with for a long time, doing freelance work. And I told him this funny story, and he didn't think it was funny at all. He just stared at me, and he said, Chris, that's a great idea for a book. So that's how it started, and it was such a blast to work on. Because like I said, I love the parks. The research I got to do I said I got to do. I didn't have to do it. I got to do it to fill in the holes in the books. And just the whole process of writing it was a blast.
The book takes each park and kind of looks at it through the eyes of a photographer and what are the best places to photograph and the gear you might need, that kind of what's the book like?
The book's kind of in 2 halves. So the first half I cover a lot of the logistics, gear, how to scout your locations before you even get to the park, different photography techniques that that apply to a lot of the subjects you come across in the park. And then the second half of the book is I go through all 59 national parks through the eyes of a photographer. So what are the things that we're looking for when we travel to a park? What's the wildlife there? What are the landscapes like? When are the wildflowers growing?
And maybe it's a dumb question, but have you been to all 59?
I have not been to all 59.
Okay, all
no,
right.
I don't. I don't have an aspiration to.
No,
no.
Really?
Some people.
I guess that's a question you get a lot, probably.
Yeah, a few people have asked, and some people want to. I'm going to do all 59 parks. You see on Twitter, there's a few people who are, I'm going to do 59 parks in a year.
The checklist type of people, right? The guys.
Yeah,
that
exactly. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not the way that I like to work. For me, it's about the photography first, and I think photography is better when you really know a place, not when you're visiting it for 2 days to check it off the list.
That's a good point.
Again, I have nothing against the idea of doing it. If that's what somebody wants to do, if that's what makes you tick, then have a blast. It's not what makes me tick. I wanna go and spend a week and a half in one place and get to know it.
Which park have you visited the most, and how many times?
Acadia, and I honestly lost track. It's about a dozen. It's about 12 times I've been to Acadia.
And it's new each time?
There are parts of it that are new each time. It's funny. Acadia is one of the smallest national parks, but there's so much there. With national parks at night, we just did a workshop there in May, and it's something I heard from almost everybody is how much variety there is in that park for a photographer. And the coastline, you can get up into the mountains, and there's bird photography, there's marshes, there's ponds, there's amazing fog, there's carriage road, these stone carriage road bridges. There's just you really can't get bored there.
So it's not that you're not interested in all 59, it's just that you have so much going on in the ones that you've been going to.
Yeah,
you want to finish those up.
It kind of. I never leave a national park shoot with everything checked off that I wanted to shoot. I always have notes left over in places I wanted to see in different light or in different weather. So a lot of times I'll take a note, maybe I'm there in June and I really want to shoot this in the winter.
Okay.
So I think
that makes sense.
Going back to a place can help you do better work.
Yeah, no two ways about it. I get it.
And this may be a tough question to answer also, but are there when you go with these groups or when you go with groups to national parks or other photographers, are people more interested in wildlife or birding, or is it landscape guys, or is it's everybody, or would you say that people really like to specialize in one thing or the other?
Well, if you're talking about the workshops we do, it's night photography, so that's going to be landscape and night sky. But when people come in the workshops, of course, they're not there just to do night photography. A lot of times people who go to a workshop haven't been to that park before. So they also want to see it during the day. So we get out, we visit the ranger station and kind of bring people to the spots that we know are good. And I find that there is a big variety. In fact, when we did the the workshop in Acadia in May, we had a photographer there. Her name was Elizabeth, and she's a bird photography specialist. And she brought her 500 f4 to a night photography workshop, which we just thought was a riot.
And are there people that come who aren't like your typical wildlife or nature photographers who want to kind of maybe shoot in, I don't want to say an ironic way, but who want to capture kind of the other aspect or even the visitors to the park and kind of that blend where humanity and nature cross, or you don't see that much?
No, I think there's a lot of opportunity there. It's not the kind of photography I like to do. I usually try to keep people out of my photos because I want to shoot nature. And I kind of like to shoot nature, untouched nature, which is another reason I like the park so much. But there's definitely huge opportunity for that. Even if you're just using people for scale, like doing mountain photography to be able to include, somebody who's climbing or just standing on a ridge.
And it's still possible, I'm sure it is, but do you have problems where you don't find untouched nature, where you're going to get, a wire, or you're going to see the side of a road or light pollution? Is that something you have to look to avoid?
Yeah. In fact, I was just a few days ago in North Cascades National Park, and one of the things there is there's power stations. It's part of the history of the park, of that area, at the lakes there and some dams. So it is part of that area, but there are spaces where you have these, huge power lines coming off of transformers that would, interrupt a photo. If you wanted a unspoiled scene, then you'd probably go to, drive a few miles down the road. Or the best thing, of course, is just to get on a trail. And
now, what about if you found that picture that this is it, I've been waiting to take this picture forever, and there is a power line in it. Will you take it out?
No.
Okay.
No.
Just curious.
That's a lot of work.
Well, there must be an ethics to nature photography.
I'm just wondering if people hold to anything like that. I mean, to me, I don't know what I would do.
I think some people hold to it.
I hope so.
But I think the line's different for everybody and why you're doing the work to begin with. Do you have to have journalistic integrity if you're producing an art photo?
Right.
It's an interesting conversation. I don't think there's a right or a wrong. It comes down to what your purpose is.
We get back to when you're talking about the book and the first half of the book, some of the logistics and stuff. Is there anything that you can talk about about the parks in general, in terms of fees, arriving, things that, like kind of the logistics of it that are applicable to photographers and maybe things that you're not going to just find on the websites?
It's not just a matter of packing up your bag and driving and getting out your car and just going. There's more to it.
Well, you can.
But if you want to do it right.
It's not what I recommend doing.
So what would you recommend?
And that can be a lot of fun. And again, I don't want to take away from somebody who does that. When I was in my 20s, let me go back. When I was in my 20s, I used to make these road trips with a photographer friend of mine. And, we'd go spend 6 hours in a park. And it was a lot of fun, to just jump into a new place that you haven't been. But if you're there to do photo work and you want to do good photo work, then, do some research before you go. I love going to Flickr and just seeing the photos that other people are doing right now, especially if you're going to do a fall foliage shoot in a park. You can go on Flickr and look up, just search for a park and see the photos that people are uploading today, this week, and it gives you an idea of where the foliage is peaking.
Right.
And the checkbooks and websites and apps like Chimani. There's so much information out there, all these questions that you can answer before you get on site. It's part of the beauty of being in the 21st century, right?
One thing that I would add is one of the things that people don't realize, particularly in July and August, is the parks are pretty overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And so one of the sort of hidden secrets that I've kind of come up with is, as long as you get to the parks before 10 a.m., there are times when you can have this beautiful park to yourself and no one's there and you're in the height of the tourism season. Right. Once 10 a.m. rolls around, everyone is now in the park, and it's at its height in terms of volume. So you can still kind of get into a lot of these places, and you just have to work with your timing of when you're actually there and kind of get ahead of people. Because folks are on vacation, they're coming from maybe sometimes just outside of the park, so there's a bit of a drive. Sure. But it seems like that magic moment is 10 a.m. in the parks.
And the magic light is well before then, so it actually works out fine.
It's an excellent point, and I can think of 2 trips I've made to Yellowstone in the past 6 years, both in the summer. And nobody's out. The only people you see in the morning are photographers. And I remember this one time in particular, and it was 2010, and I hadn't gotten out of the car yet. The sun had just come up, and I'm kind of figuring out what I'm going to shoot, and I hear this noise, and there's a stampede of about 15 bison heading right toward me, and they went on both sides of the car and parked at the side of the road, and they're just right by me. And what an incredible moment, and I was there to witness it alone.
Right.
I thought you were going to tell me that 15 bison came up and just took out cameras and started photographing you.
Yeah, they were shooting with polarizers.
And are there any restrictions on photography of any?
Yeah, do you
any
need
sort?
if you use a tripod? Do you need a permit?
You don't. No, you only
Okay.
need a. You need a permit if you're doing a commercial shoot.
Okay.
And so there's different ways that there's different criteria they use to judge whether you're a commercial shoot. But if you're only 1 or 2 people, that's fine. The cutoff is 3. Are you using props? Are you using lighting? Do you need to shoot somewhere where the general public's not allowed? But for most people, just going into the park with a tripod or 2 tripods, I mean, if you're just there alone doing your own work, you're fine.
Because certain federal lands, I mean, as soon as you take out a tripod, that classifies you as a professional photographer and a commercial photographer. That's why I was asking. So
Yeah.
it's good to know that you could actually still go into a park and with a tripod, and no one's going to give you a hard time.
Well, speaking of gear and whatnot, can you kind of give us I don't know, your basic kit or some ideas in terms of obviously lenses and cameras, but maybe some of the other accessories that you use?
Okay, my basic kit. Say, I have a problem. I was a Boy Scout, so I'm very much of the be prepared
That is a
variety of
problem.
photographer. So I just got back from a trip yesterday, the North Cascades and Olympic National
And what
Park.
was that for yourself, or were you on
I
assignment?
was.
Or
It was both. I was in Olympic shooting a video with Creative Live, National Parks at Night. We did. It's going to be in September, Night Photography Week. So we filmed this whole week-long event with Creative Live, and my segment was in Olympic National Park. So I was out there filming that, and then I had a couple extra days, so I went to North Cascades on my own just for fun.
And now that would be considered a commercial shoot, and they had that organized and produced. and something
Exactly,
like that.
right. So there
okay.
were 4 people, including myself. The producer, and there's a camera person and a production assistant. And yes, so there was a permit for that,
Right.
which Creative Live takes care of all that. And it was interesting because one of the things with a commercial shoot is you can't go into the wilderness. There's official wilderness areas. So there were even restrictions with the permit.
Okay. All right.
Interesting. Okay.
So
Yeah.
And is this kind of thing you could just show up and apply for a permit right then and there? Or do you
No.
have to do this? You need this in advance.
You apply ahead of time.
Okay.
I'm sure.
That's
Yeah,
important.
one of the things I might add in terms of just planning, if you're taking a lot of photographs, it's energy sources or recharging batteries can be a real challenge when you're in the parks.
Yeah.
So, a lot of times, like, I'm not necessarily there to do photographs that are going to be in our apps per se, but I'm documenting the park. And I just use it using my camera, just to take interpretive signs, just to get a sense of what it's like. So I'm doing a lot of photographs, and I have to be really prepared to make sure I've got a backup battery, or and something that is because basically a lot of times you're running around to find the closest visitor center,
Right.
and you're running around trying to find a free outlet, and it's not like an airport these days where there are plenty. So if anything's energy dependent, you can quickly find yourself
And everything's
with-
energy dependent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually, for that exact reason, I always bring an inverter with me. So when I'm driving from one place to another, I can just plug stuff in the car.
Right. Yeah, your car is good
Yeah,
for that.
in the backcountry, it's a whole different story. Then you need spare batteries. You could do this. Tether Tools has a piece you can use to reach. I think you could recharge your camera battery, 4 or 5 times
Right.
with it. And what I'm really excited about, I don't think the technology is there yet for cameras and computer recharging, but the solar backpacks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in a couple of years that will be a viable option for photographers who want to go spend a week in the backcountry shooting.
Absolutely. So getting back then to your setup, what do you use? What do you
Yes.
shoot with? What's your
So I
go-tos?
kind of have one of everything. I've got I'm a
But
fan.
no backups.
No, well, it's funny you say that. Yeah, there are a few things I carry a backup, but I have my lens range is usually from 17 to 300. not one lens. I don't like the all-in-ones, but I've got a 17 to 35 and a 28-70, 80 to 200, and a 300 2.8.
Okay.
I might bring along something else if I'm, in a park like Yellowstone with great wildlife. I might bring a 400 or a 500 with me for that, but generally wouldn't. And I also carry a macro lens.
And will there be some times where you'll say, this is not the trip where I'm going to do wildlife photography, and you just won't bother? So you kind of gear each trip. I shouldn't say gear each, but you prepare for each trip.
Right. Yeah, well, so the trip I just made to Olympic and North Cascades, I didn't even bring the 300.
Right.
So the 80 to 200 was my longest lens because I knew it was going to be just landscapes.
Right. Yeah.
And somewhere in the back of your head, was it bothering you that you didn't have a 300 just in case?
No, and it's funny. It happened the other way around in Death Valley last year. I brought my 300 2.8 on my back, cross country, flying with it and having to tote it through the airport and everything. And I was in Death Valley on a shoot for 4 days, and on the last day, I hadn't used it yet. And I said, I did not carry this lens out here not to use it. And I found something that last morning. I said, I got to find something to shoot with the 300.
And as a, I guess primarily a landscape guy, what's your tripod choice?
I use the Gitzo 3541.
Okay. Is it carbon fiber?
It's a carbon fiber. Yeah, it's light enough. I kind of switched. I was still using aluminum when I was about 35, and it was getting just old enough to not want to do that anymore.
Yeah,
So I love the light carbon fiber tripods. I also have the new, it's the Manfrotto 190 Go. I just got it, so I haven't gotten to play with it a lot yet. But it's a pretty sleek tripod.
Okay. And are there any items that we might not normally think of that are kind of essentials for you?
Yeah, in fact, you mentioned backup gear. There's a few things I always make sure I have a back because they're so important to a shoot. Because I always think, everybody has their cameras that they like. I'm not going to try to talk anybody into changing. But what I do always push is the ancillary gear, which I think makes a real difference between, an easier shoot or a harder time out there. I'm almost always shooting with a polarizing filter. It's so critical to my work that I have two. Because if something were to ever happen to it, it would just completely change how I'd have to approach a park. Right. Also an intervalometer or even just a cable release. If that's important to your work, if you're doing night photography or shooting waterfalls, anything with long exposures, if that were to break, then you're out of luck. You could use the camera self-timer, but that just wastes a lot of time.
When you're shooting landscapes, do you ever use any of the graduated filters, either the neutral or color?
I do. I carry them. I don't use them all the time because with some scenes, it's easier to do it in post-production. Grad ND filters are great for a straight horizon. Anything where your graduation is along an even plane. You get into the mountains, it can get trickier because it's kind of a jagged. But I carry them. I use them when that's the best tool to use. And then if I think that combining two exposures in post-production, if I think that's the best tool, then I'll keep the graduated ND in the bag and do it that way instead.
You also said before that you actually carry a backup polarizing filter.
Do.
Now, are all your lenses the same filter size, or do you have a large? Oh, they are. Okay.
Yes, that's
that makes
something
it easy.
I've always made sure. So I shoot Nikon, and all the lenses I have are 77 millimeter filter, except for the 300 2.8. But that has a drop-in filter, so that's easy.
Okay.
What's your backpack? Or do you use a backpack?
I just started using a Manfrotto Bumblebee, and it's nice. So it's a pretty new design, and it has some nice features to it. It's got a laptop slot in it, and it's very comfortable, which is the big thing. Yeah, because if you're going to be in the backcountry, you don't want anything rubbing a wrong spot in the wrong way, and it's a very comfortable backpack to carry around.
I always say when it comes to bags, make sure you like it and it's comfortable because you're going to be living with this thing, especially when it's loaded up.
Absolutely.
And what about favorite locations or favorite parks or favorite vistas? I mean, is there anything that stands out?
How long do we have?
I'll give you three.
Well, I love Acadia because that was kind of my backyard park growing up. I mean, it was a 7-hour drive from Connecticut, but it was the one I was closest to. I love Olympic National Park. It's like 3 completely different ecosystems to shoot in with the rainforest and the mountains and the coast, and they're all beautiful. Yellowstone has so much variety as a photographer. You can focus on a different genre every day. Like you could shoot wildlife one day and wildflowers the next and geothermal features the next. So much there to do. And then the night skies, something that I think we don't think about a lot is, we all know that the national parks preserve these great landscapes and they preserve homes for wildlife and the animals, but they also preserve darkness,
Right.
Because they tend to be in these remote areas and places where they take light pollution seriously. So many of the parks have great night skies. Death Valley. I was just in some of the Utah parks in Zion and Capitol Reef in the spring. Just gorgeous night skies, especially if you live anywhere near a city, to be able to get out to these places and see what the sky looked like to our ancestors of even just 100 years ago. It's breathtaking.
Where haven't you been that you want to go to?
Oh, that's a good one. I would love to go to Kings Canyon National Park. Haven't been there.
Where is that?
The Kings Canyon is it's in California, and it's right snug up against Sequoia National Park.
Oh, okay.
Which is, that's one of the more famous ones. But Kings Canyon, just beautiful mountain country there. In fact, Ansel Adams had a big hand in getting that established as a national park because he loved shooting in that area so much.
And what about some of kind of the classic views, like I don't know, El Capitan or others? Do you just avoid those because there's too many people? I mean, are some of these famous places just kind of impossible to get a shot without somebody standing in front of you with a cell phone, or
with a camera?
Yeah.
There are a few spots that get a little crowded. I don't avoid them.
Mm-hmm.
There's an argument to be made either way. Some photographers just don't want to photograph something that's been photographed, and that's fine.
Totally.
I shoot them anyway for a few reasons. I mean, one, there's a business purpose.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm telling people I shot Yellowstone, and they ask me for a photo of Old Faithful, I've got to be able to say I have it, right? But also, there's a reason that these places are photographed so much. They're beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to take a crack at it too. But the third thing is I also like the challenge of trying to find something new to do in a place that's been photographed a million times. Whether to I always say do some research, find out the best times to go and all that. But flip that around too. Find the best times to go and then go at a different time and see what you can make of it.
Yeah.
There's this spot in Yellowstone, Artist Point, which
Mm-hmm.
is one of the most, might be the most famous spot to shoot after Tunnel View in Yosemite and the whole park system. And you look back at that old work that was done. Moran did a painting of it. Jackson did a photo of it. Ansel Adams shot it.
Right.
And then people are still shooting it today. It's this one spot that just draws people for all these years.
Well, yeah. Any tips that you would throw out, or that you mention a lot when you talk about this to photographers? Maybe things people wouldn't normally think about.
I'd say get on the trail.
Yeah.
In Yellowstone, they talk about the 90-10 rule. There's 90% of the visitors see only 10% of the park. And that goes for a lot of photographers too, especially when you're carrying the gear. It's easy to just work out of the trunk of the car and to go to the overlooks and all that. And you could do a lot of beautiful work that way. But if you go even just a quarter of a mile down a trail in any national park, you can probably find yourself alone. And just go for even just a day hike, and you'll find these spots that are just yours to shoot. Places that haven't been photographed a million times.
Okay, we're going to take a short break, and we're going to come back and speak with Kerry.
We hope you're enjoying this edition of the B&H Photography Podcast. Send us a tweet at BHPhotoVideo, #BHPhotoPodcast.
We are back. Kerry, can you tell us a little bit about Chimani, how it started off and
Sure.
everything
yeah.
it does?
Yeah. So ironically,
Where it is.
ironically, it actually started in Acadia, my home park as well.
100 years ago?
Not 100, but it feels like that in the age of technology, actually. So 2008. So that seems like 100 years.
Yeah, it does. In terms of,
Yeah. So I mean, really, I was in the park hiking, and it was pretty early spring, so it was still kind of rough conditions with some snow on the ground. I was traveling light, and I had the first generation iPhone. And when I started to sort of want to learn more about the park myself, myself and not having a paper guide, I quickly realized that more people were going to want to use this device as it became more popular and became a part of the experience. And then also that the signal was very difficult to get. There was virtually no connectivity.
Right.
Yeah. So that was the beginning of Chimani. And so the basic concept around Chimani is to still take the value that comes from curated original content that you would expect from a travel guidebook, but to have that designed specifically for a mobile app experience, but more importantly, have it work without a cell phone connection. And so we developed these guides specific to national parks and to make sure that any information that you need to get on it works when you have no connection whatsoever.
Now, when you say any information, that aside from really wonderful photography, what kind of information, say I'm going to Yellowstone or any of the parks that you have apps, what are you giving me in that? What am I going to find? What kind of information as a photographer?
Yep. Yeah. So probably, one of the things that is of great value is to begin, as Chris has talked about, is just beginning to plan your trip. And so, you can use the app to really even basic bookmarking of the different spots that you want to go to. And to have that in the palm of your hand.
And photos are included in each of your...
Yep, exactly.
So you know what to expect.
Exactly. And, and also once again, what you're bookmarking is available when you don't have a signal. And it's also all geolocated information. So the maps for our apps, you download them and they're available offline. So the GPS still works, and you can find out exactly where that point of interest is that you're going to begin your shoot. The other thing that people really find of value as a photographer is that we have the sunrise, sunset information for a lot of the key locations within the park. But not only that, we've got also the golden hours, which is included in that. And so this is information for a full year into the future, available offline for a range of different locations within the park, in your cell phone, and completely accessible.
That's important, I think, when doing state parks, because the golden light is not necessarily the same time it would be if everything is flat.
Yeah, exactly.
And most of these parks have a lot of mountains, which change everything. Yeah. So that's pretty useful to have.
Which is why we don't just have one entry. I mean, once again, all of this is geolocated. So, we're pulling in data from different locations throughout the park.
That's pretty good.
And I'm assuming maps are one of the more important aspects of the...
Maps are the number one used function within the apps. Just basic navigation. The photo gallery is pretty much number 3. Okay. Our apps are as you download them, and they're all available for free. It's a very visual design. The park experience that we were talking earlier, where photography is really the top 3 activities within parks. It really is an informal activity right next to hiking and auto touring, especially now with the age of a lot of the amateur photography that comes with the iPhones. It is such a key experience. So talking about other tips, what we'll try and do, and this is more geared to, I think, more of the amateur photographer, is just to give them some basic orientation about, you maybe just be shooting on your iPhone, but just don't shoot in the middle of the day,
Please don't do that.
Exactly, and some recommendations of some of the more iconic locations that you might want to go.
Are the pictures you have on your app, are they static, or if I take what I think is an amazing picture, can I upload it to your site? Is there a gallery? Is there a place people can share?
We don't have a way in which we can automatically add it on the fly. Of course, once again, there's some tricky engineering that we do to make it all work offline. But we encourage folks to actually send photographs. So the majority of our photographs that are within the apps are really done by what I'd call sort of like semi-pro amateur type photographers that we've either identified who've just been shooting the park, and that's their home park, and we reach out to them, and this serves as a platform to showcase their work. But in general, as people see, we don't have a photograph for every point of interest, because there are hundreds. Exactly. Nuts, and that's where we really reach out to other photographers to feel free to submit their work.
How many parks do you actually have coverage on?
Yeah, so we have an individual guide for all 59.
There's an app for each individual park, and then an 59. Overall app, I noticed,
Exactly, exactly. So we've started to expand. We have a guide for Cape Cod National Seashore as well, which is not necessarily a national park. But that was as of June 1st, we launched a free individual app for all 59 national parks.
And also, I think it's one thing that dawned on me when I was loaning up for this podcast, that all 59 of these parks are not necessarily in the continental United States. There are other. What are some of the faraway parks that are included here?
Well, I mean, American Samoa is probably the furthest away, which is essentially closer to Australia than it is mainland U.S.
Yeah.
And my favorite is Dry Tortugas, which is a 3.5-hour one-way ferry ride from Key West.
Right.
And then of course you've got all of the Alaskan parks. Even beyond Denali, it's some very remote parks in Alaska as well.
Let me quickly get
Virgin
back to-
Islands too.
Yeah, exactly.
Virgin Islands also.
Yeah.
You said you source your photos from. You will reach out to some photographers, but and you'll take submissions. But do you also go to stock photography if you need to, or is it kind of a catch-all type of situation?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the National Park Service, their Flickr feeds have really started to improve quite a bit. And so as you start to get a lot more rangers who are really actively supporting that, so when we get photographs from them, it's a lot of just sort of orientating the user about the app so that we've got a visual image that we can attach to a point of interest.
And you find a lot of rangers are also photographers?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some amazing rangers that are actually really great photographers, and the Park Service has really started to embrace social media.
Yeah.
It varies from park to park. It also just varies based on the skill set. But there are some parks where their Flickr feed has really improved quite a bit over the years.
And what's your relationship with the National Park Service? Do you have?
We don't have a formal relationship.
But it's all good.
Yeah, no, they're great. We work more with specific parks. For example, when we launched our Petrified Forest app, as a smaller park, they were very excited about the fact that they had this private company that they could work with, and it was virtually free for their visitors. So we worked with them. They actually invited us down to the park, and just to fill out that 10%. And make it absolutely accurate. So one of our staff members were with them for 2 days working with that.
How large is your organization?
Now, there are 7 of us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 7 of us based in Portland, Maine. Yeah.
Wow. All right.
Yeah.
And when you were a hiker and a camper, this was your thing before you got into this?
Yeah, but I've worked for the Park Service once, and that was in Point Reyes National Seashore, but it was in their environmental ed camping college. That's my only formal experience. I've just been passionate about the outdoors, and I think the interesting connection here, and I've always done eclectic technology type projects.
Okay.
When we talked about, you may ask this question again, but the origin of Chimani is actually a national park in Zimbabwe. It's named for the Chimani Mountains National Park in Zimbabwe.
Oh, I just thought you were big on Greek yogurt.
No, exactly.
Chimani.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So a lot of international tracking, but when the mobile device came out, it was really the first time where I could actually, bridge my passion for technology and the outdoors, because this is really finally a device that was going to be part of the outdoor experience.
And you're a free app, so how, if I may ask, how do you guys monetize?
Yeah, so we work with a lot of large brands actually that look at the national park demographic, and we have a unique way in which they can actually include their branding and message within the apps. And if you look at our apps, it's divided into these sort of iconic categories: hiking, auto touring, and then we use one of those essentially spaces within the app to allow for messaging for the different brands.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's still a wild west with the mobile app world in terms of how do you turn this into a business. So you have to be creative, and and we have such a there's a very clear demographic that goes to national parks, and a lot of brands recognize that demographic is very much in line with some of their marketing goals. So I think it's ultimately a win-win for the customer, because in a lot of ways it's a non-intrusive way of still making the apps free, but still having a strong brand that in general is actually usually connected to the national park experience in many ways.
Do you still get out to parks regularly, and do you have guides and writers that are, I guess, people who go out find something new and then you include it in the app?
Well, yeah. So we work with about 25 different writers right now. So they're scattered all around, and we also have a whole network of ambassadors, brand ambassadors. So these are passionate people about the park that love our app, and so they're starting to produce a lot more content. And then, quite honestly, a lot of what were sort of the updates or any new information come from our users.
Okay.
How often do you update? Is if there's, let's say, a problem or a storm, you get all that information up there as much?
Yeah, we have a pretty fancy way where our editor can go in and edit an entry, and we can publish it, and the clients are essentially updated with 24 hours. We also use push notifications with the app for more time-sensitive information, closures, or significant events that are happening within particular parks. And so that's a very top-of-mind type notification that will be sent out.
So this is not a static app. This is very organic.
Yeah.
And Chris, did you use the app? Is that how you came
all
across?
59 are on my iPad.
Yeah.
He doesn't even go out taking pictures anymore. He just flips.
Yeah.
And Kerry, you were saying that you've grown to include parks in England?
Yeah. So we just launched Lake District National Park in the United Kingdom. And so it's our first international park. And so we're really working closely with the Park Service and our people who have worked at that park to really kind of understand the new dynamics of an international park. And the plan, we've got a number of other international parks are in the editorial queue right now. The park experience is really neat because it really is an international experience. We've 3 years ago we were talking to the Israeli Park Service. They approached us because the challenges that they find and why a lot of people kind of reach out to us is that it's that offline connectivity that is a really challenging engineering issue to work on, and because from the start we've always built everything to work offline and to work specifically for these destinations.
Were there other nations' national parks that we used as our models, or are we one of the first? Do you guys know anything about the history of national parks around the world?
Yeah, well, I mean, we were the first, and I think folks have maybe fine-tuned the model.
Yeah,
I always refer to New Zealand as probably the country that's really set up a great public-private type infrastructure.
How far back does their Park Service go? Do you have any idea?
I don't know, but it's certainly not as long as ours. But don't quote me on that.
Okay, but ours is the first national.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. We really.
Yeah, Yellowstone was the first national park in the world.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how often do we add a new park to our system? Is there kind of a
not often anymore?
What's the most
in
recent?
2013, Pinnacles.
Pinnacles.
National
Oh,
Park.
right.
And there was some talk about trying to get a park done this year for the Centennial, but I don't think they're close to that happening.
Is B&H a national park?
Because
there are people that come to New York specifically just to come here, shop, or look around and gawk, and then get on a plane and fly away. I mean, it's true.
It was to me because I bought every camera from B&H, and and it wasn't until recently that I actually walked into the store. So
we are an official New York City tourist attraction. Yeah, seriously, we are.
Well, it's funny. There've been times I've been in the park and I wear I've got a black B&H hat. It's great for night photography. I wear it a lot. And people will ask me across the country, "Oh, B&H," and because they know the store. That's where they buy their stuff. I've met a lot of people who have said, "Oh, I've never been to the store. It's 3,000 miles away from my house."
But all of my spare money goes there.
Yes.
somehow. So, Kerry, do you have any favorite parks or any favorite parts of parks, or is that tough to answer? You want to be very fair, I suppose.
They're all special because that's why they're all national parks.
Right.
Like Chris, I mean, Acadia was really my home park. Yeah, I spent the most time there. I went to school on the West Coast, so Yosemite was definitely deep in my heart.
Was Acadia the first East Coast park to be named? Because you said it's coming up on its 100th anniversary also. So
exactly. Yeah, so it's celebrated its anniversary, but the official sort of celebration is 2 days after the National Park Service celebration on the 27th.
When they started this up, the Park Service, how many parks were automatically designated, and in what period of time? Any idea?
Yeah.
Do you know the exact number? How many were? Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't either.
Yeah.
But it was kind of, there was no umbrella oversight organization for these parks that we had created. So the Park Service was founded in 1916 to manage all of that.
Okay. All right. Got it.
Right. This is the Centennial of the service.
Of the service.
not the
Okay.
park,
Yes.
right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So these parks actually existed earlier than 100 years ago.
Yeah, some of them.
Yeah, exactly.
Couple of them,
Exactly.
yeah.
You go back to Yellowstone, and I mean, they were essentially the park rangers or the army.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there was no park service, and so the protection and the enforcement, and whether it be poachers or whatnot, was done by the army.
In Yosemite, they had buffalo soldiers
Yeah.
stationed there, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's some debate whether or not technically maybe Yosemite was the first park, but it didn't actually have that designation.
Well, it was
so-
set aside, but California was left to manage it.
Right.
So it wasn't national technically
Right.
until after Yellowstone.
Interesting. Okay. A raging battle.
Yeah.
Raging
Oh,
debate.
and then if you really want to get into it, ask somebody from Arkansas. Because
yeah?
Hot Springs National Park was preserved in some fashion earlier in the 1800s, but again, not named a national park. So, but ask somebody from Arkansas, and they'll make this conversation lively.
Sounds good. All righty. So, well, maybe I can throw this out to both of you guys as maybe a final question, or for like your regular photographer, not your pros or you're really established. Are there ways to get their work the photos they take in the parks out there? I mean, is there any kind of place to submit photos? I know the National Park Service has an incredible archive that Ellen mentioned, but I don't think they just take submissions. Do you know? I mean, if you're a photographer and you frequent the parks, what can you do with your stuff?
Well, there's two things that come to mind. One is I just did an interview with Jacob W. Frank, who's a photographer who's a ranger at Glacier National Park. He's probably the best known photographer
where's
slash
Where's
ranger.
Glacier? Just
That's
to
in
be-
Montana.
In Montana.
And he was talking about, because he started as a volunteer, and he was talking about opportunities. He said a lot of the smaller parks would be very open to that because they don't have a budget to have a photographer on staff. So if you live near a place like, maybe Congaree National Park in South Carolina, that's, it's a smaller park. If you were to live there, it'd maybe offer
Your services.
Yeah,
show your work.
Right. Another thing is the national park, the annual passes, all have a photo on them. Every year, it's a different photo, and they actually have a contest for that. And it's a very good photography contest with good prizes. A couple years ago, I believe the cash prize was $15,000 plus gear, plus exposure. And that's if you go to sharetheexperience.org, all the information is there.
All right, that's cool. And does the Park Service have a dedicated photography staff or a team? Do you know?
There is a photographer, I think, for the entire Park Service.
Yeah,
they recently were advertising that there was an opening, and they're paid pretty well, but you have no home life.
It went viral. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was at the end of last year.
Yeah.
They posted this job where they wanted an 8x10 negative photographer.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So it was kind of today's Ansel Adams that they were looking for.
Ellen? Go for it.
I only own a 4.5. I can't do it. Interesting.
You're halfway there.
All right, this has been a lot of fun. Interesting topic on the parks. A nice change for pace for us here as well. Kerry, can you tell us where people can find your app?
Sure, absolutely. So you can go to our website, which is chimani.com. That's spelled CHIMANI.com. Or you can just go into either Google Play or the Apple App Store and type in Chimani, and you'll see a whole list of all the parks available for free.
Okay, and it's a wonderful site, very, very well designed,
And-
a lot of fun to get through.
Real quickly, is there an advantage to going to one of the individual park apps? I mean, is there more information, more specific information that you're going to
Yeah.
find on the general app?
Yeah, the general app really, we kind of call it our virtual bookshelf. It gives an overview, and it's
Yeah.
also a complete overview of the entire Park Service system. So as soon as there's a new unit, we'll actually add that to the total catalog. But for detailed guides, I mean, the level of detail we get down to is where the restrooms are. I mean, seriously, it's probably our 5th most used feature, seriously.
I believe it.
So
Good to
that's
know.
really the level of
Good to
detail
know.
that you get with the individual detail guides.
That's great.
There's a big picture of a tree when you open up that.
I've taken many of outhouse photographs just to document them.
Okay, good. Okay, so Chimani.com.
Yes.
That's the easy answer for this, right? Yeah.
Chris,
Okay, cool.
where can we find your work?
Well, my book, Photographing National Parks, is on Amazon and also at my website, which is photographingnationalparks.com. And then at the night photography workshops, we're just about to launch our 2017 itinerary, just about to announce that. So,
And where can we find that?
nationalparksatnight.com.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Kerry. Thank you, Chris. Thanks to my producers and partners in crime, John Harris and Jason Tables. If you like today's show, spread the word by leaving a review and rate us on iTunes. And as always, thank you so much for tuning in today.